saved. I get just excited that I know who Jesus is. And there are plenty of people in the world that wake up every day not knowing who Jesus is.
Tonight, communities across our area are mourning the loss of Pastor Dequarius Green. Though the shooting happened in Level Plains, Green was widely known in Montgomery for his ministry and outreach. WSFA 12 News reporter Jessica Knox spoke with a friend remembering the man he knew.
I was very hurt. Of course, I was devastated because I was like, I couldn't believe this happened to him. And of course, then to find out how it happened and who did it, that was even more devastating.
Minister Devontae Palmer is one of many now grieving the loss of Pastor Dequarius Green. Palmer says the two were not close friends, but their paths cross often at church and even checking up with him at Green's previous job at Walmart.
So from time to time, after I get done with there, I just go to see him and just chat it up, and then for like 5-10 minutes and go by my way because he working. I can't talk all day.
Palmer says those conversations were brief but meaningful.
In December 2025, Pastor Dequarius Green, a 31-year-old leader of Elba Zion Missionary Baptist Church, was shot inside a residence in Level Plains, Alabama. He was rushed to the hospital, but despite medical efforts, he died days later. Authorities described the incident as a domestic dispute, yet no arrests were made and no charges were publicly filed. Who fired the fatal shot, and under what circumstances did the confrontation occur? How did prior domestic violence allegations against Green influence, if at all, what unfolded that night? Were there witnesses whose accounts have not been made public, and what might they reveal about the sequence of events? Has the investigation officially concluded, or are unanswered questions still under review by law enforcement? This case exposes a sequence of events that remains largely in the shadows, leaving more questions than answers about the life, the death, and the circumstances surrounding Dequarius Green.
And family friends continue to mourn the loss of Montgomery native and pastor Dequarius Green, who died last month. Today, many green balloons soared in the air in honor of the man friends call Slim or Just Green. Green's mother, alongside several friends and church members, say they remember Green as someone who was respectful, kind, and always dressed nice. Friends said love was something Green gave to everyone.
He was very loving because that's what his touch was. He was a loving person. He's just Green. I mean, he was loving, caring, kind. Whatever you do, Green gonna show you love. No matter what you did, Green was gonna show love.
He used to give me hugs every time we go to church. He always had your back, and he was just caring.
Green was shot at a home in Level Plains shortly before Christmas. Police say it was a domestic incident. He was the pastor of Elba Zion Missionary Baptist Church. The case is still under investigation.
Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from and what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Dequarius Green was a 31-year-old man living in Alabama at the time of his death. He had strong geographic ties to both Dale County and the nearby Montgomery area, where he spent much of his personal and professional life. Green resided primarily in Dale County, an area that includes small communities where personal relationships and public reputation often intersect. His name became widely known after a shooting incident in Level Plains, a town within the county. Green was a father and maintained romantic relationships that played a significant role in the events leading up to his death. Court filings and public records indicate he was involved in at least one long-term relationship marked by ongoing disputes. He had children with at least one woman connected to those disputes, placing him in an ongoing co-parenting dynamic that extended beyond personal disagreements into legal and domestic territory. These relationships were not widely discussed in public before the incident, but they were documented in private legal proceedings. Despite these personal circumstances, Green was publicly known primarily through his ministry role. Dequarius Green served as pastor at Elba Zion Missionary Baptist Church, a congregation based in Dale County. He held a leadership position that placed him in regular contact with church members, fellow clergy, and the wider faith community. His ministry work included preaching, church administration, and community engagement typical of pastors serving smaller congregations. Green had been involved in ministry for several years prior to his death. During that time, he developed a reputation among supporters as a committed faith leader. He was viewed publicly as a man dedicated to religious service, moral guidance, and spiritual leadership. Church statements released after his death focused on his pastoral role, his dedication to ministry, and his presence within the congregation. Within church settings, Green was regarded as a spiritual authority figure. He occupied a position that carried influence, trust, and respect. To many congregants, his public image was aligned with expectations of integrity and leadership associated with clergy. This public role became a central point of discussion after his death, particularly as details from his private life became more widely known. The contrast between Green's public image and his private legal history became one of the most scrutinized aspects of the case. While he was publicly recognized as a pastor, court records painted a more complicated picture of his personal life. These records revealed ongoing domestic conflicts that were not widely known within the church community at the time they occurred. Public perception of Green prior to the shooting was largely shaped by his ministry role. Many community members were unaware that he'd been the subject of multiple domestic violence allegations. These allegations did not result in convictions, which meant they remained outside public discussion for much of the time. As a result, the version of Green known to his congregation differed significantly from the version documented in court filings. Some individuals within the community were aware of personal disputes involving Green, particularly those close to the situation. However, there is no indication that these issues were openly addressed within church leadership structures or publicly discussed before the fatal incident. This gap between public identity and private conflict is a recurring theme in cases involving authority figures whose private lives remain largely hidden until a crisis occurs. In the year leading up to the shooting, Dequarius Green faced multiple misdemeanor domestic violence charges. These charges were filed in 2025 and stemmed from allegations made by a former partner. According to court records, the allegations included claims of physical abuse during domestic disputes. One of the most serious components of these filings involved claims that abuse occurred during pregnancy. Protective order petitions submitted by the woman described repeated incidents and sought legal intervention to limit contact and provide protection. These petitions outlined concerns about safety and escalation, which are commonly cited in domestic violence cases. The allegations followed a pattern rather than a single isolated incident. Multiple filings over a relatively short period suggested ongoing conflict rather than a one-time dispute. Each filing initiated a legal process that required testimony and cooperation from the alleged victim in order to proceed. Despite the seriousness of the allegations, none of the domestic violence cases resulted in convictions. Court records show that the charges were dismissed after the alleged victims declined to testify. Without testimony, prosecutors were unable to move forward, leading to the closure of each case. At the time of Green's death, there were no active restraining orders or protective orders in effect. Legally, he was not under any conviction related to domestic violence. This legal status is significant because it meant there were no court-mandated restrictions in place governing his contact with the individuals involved. The repeated dismissal of cases highlights a common challenge in domestic violence prosecutions. When alleged victims do not testify, whether due to fear, pressure, or other factors, cases often cannot proceed. This results in allegations remaining legally unresolved, even when patterns are present. The legal history shows repeated allegations occurring in a condensed time frame. Such patterns are often associated with escalating domestic disputes, particularly when intervention does not occur. Each dismissed case returned the involved parties to the same circumstances without legal resolution. The absence of convictions or enforced protective orders meant there were limited external barriers preventing further contact or conflict. From a legal standpoint, the system did not establish long-term intervention despite repeated filings. This represents a missed opportunity for earlier resolution or protective measures that might have altered subsequent events. At the time of the shooting, DeQuarries Green was involved in a domestic relationship with a woman who was present at the residence where the incident occurred. The exact nature of their relationship, whether current or recently estranged, remains partially unclear, but it was rooted in prior domestic disputes documented in court records. The relationship had a documented history of conflict. Legal filings indicate ongoing disagreements and allegations of abuse, suggesting unresolved tensions. There is evidence of prior legal interaction between the two, including court appearances related to domestic allegations. No public records indicate that recent disputes had been resolved through mediation, counseling, or court-ordered intervention. The lack of formal resolution meant the relationship continued without structured oversight. The shooting occurred at a residence in the Freedom Heights neighborhood of Level Plains, Alabama. The area is a residential community consisting of single-family homes. Law enforcement responded to an emergency call reporting a domestic incident involving a firearm. At the time officers arrived, DeQuarries Green had sustained a gunshot wound. The woman involved was present at the scene. Information about other individuals in the home, including children or additional witnesses, has not been fully disclosed publicly. Nearby residents were in close proximity, but there is limited public information regarding eyewitness accounts. Law enforcement secured the scene and began an investigation, marking the end of a series of events that had unfolded over months through private disputes and unresolved legal matters.
Tonight, communities across our area are mourning the loss of Pastor DeQuarries Green. Though the shooting happened in Level Plains, Green was widely known in Montgomery for his ministry and outreach. WSFA 12 News reporter Jessica Knox spoke with a friend remembering the man he knew.
I was very hurt. Of course, I was devastated because I was like, I couldn't believe this happened to him. And of course, then to find out how it happened and who did it, that was even more devastating.
Minister Devontae Palmer is one of many now grieving the loss of Pastor DeQuarries Green. Palmer says the two were not close friends, but their paths crossed often at church and even checking up with him at Green's previous job at Walmart.
So from time to time, after I get done with there, I just go to see him and just chat it up, and then for like 5-10 minutes and go by my way because he working. I can't talk all day.
Palmer says those conversations were brief but meaningful. To Palmer, Green was known for humility and faith.
To me, the man was a humble man, an honest man. He was a man who deeply loved God, his family, and one who just wanted to do the right thing.
One moment stands out the most.
Got me when he came to the church. You know, I had no idea he was coming. He actually surprised me. He tapped on my shoulder and said, "Brother Palmer," oh snap. I had no idea he was coming that day.
Green died just days after being shot in what police called a domestic incident. Those who knew him say they remember a man committed to faith, family, and service.
Again, you know, that wasn't the guy that I knew. You know what I'm saying? Again, like I was telling somebody today, you know, I can only go for what I knew. Pastor Green, he was human, right? He was a man of God. He was a father. He was a husband, hard worker. He did not deserve to die.
Authorities say no charges have been filed at this time. However, the investigation is still ongoing. In Montgomery, I'm Jessica Knox, WSFA 12 News.
And the Elba Zion Missionary Baptist Church held a prayer vigil this weekend.
On December 23, 2025, law enforcement authorities in Dale County, Alabama, responded to a reported shooting at a residence in the Freedom Heights neighborhood of Level Plains, Alabama. The incident occurred during the evening hours, though an exact timestamp has not been publicly released. The location was identified as a private residence not affiliated with any church or public institution. An emergency call was placed to local authorities reporting that a man had been shot during a domestic dispute. The caller's identity has not been publicly disclosed. Dispatch records confirmed that deputies from the Dale County Sheriff's Office were sent to the scene immediately after the call was received. Upon arrival, deputies found DeQuarius Green inside the residence, suffering from a gunshot wound. The scene was secured to ensure there was no ongoing threat. Emergency medical services were requested without delay. Deputies conducted an initial assessment, separating individuals present in the home and beginning preliminary questioning to establish what had occurred before their arrival. No pursuit or search for a suspect was conducted, indicating that the individual involved in the shooting was already present at the scene and cooperative with law enforcement. Deputies remained on site while medical personnel rendered aid and prepared Green for transport to a hospital. Law enforcement officials confirmed that DeQuarius Green sustained a gunshot wound during what they described as a domestic-related incident. The term domestic indicated that the individuals involved had a personal or intimate relationship, though specific details about the nature of that relationship were not publicly outlined. At the scene, Green's condition was described as critical. The gunshot injury was serious enough to require immediate hospitalization and advanced medical intervention. Authorities did not release information about the location of the wound, the distance from which the firearm was discharged, or the number of shots fired. The weapon involved was secured by deputies at the scene. Law enforcement confirmed that the firearm was taken into evidence and that the residence was brought under immediate control. There were no reports of additional injuries, no indication of children being harmed, and no suggestion that the incident extended beyond those directly involved. Authorities stated that there was no ongoing threat to the public. This confirmation reinforced that the incident was isolated to the residents and did not involve random or external actors. Despite the information confirmed by law enforcement, several critical elements of the incident have not been publicly clarified. The exact sequence of events leading up to the gunshot has not been disclosed. It is unknown what transpired in the moments before the firearm was discharged, including whether the confrontation escalated gradually or occurred suddenly. Authorities have not stated who initiated physical contact, if any physical confrontation occurred at all. There has been no official confirmation regarding whether the incident involved a struggle, an attempt to leave the residence, or a confrontation over a specific dispute. It is also unclear whether verbal threats were exchanged prior to the shooting. Law enforcement has not released transcripts, summaries, or paraphrased statements from those present in the home that would clarify whether warnings, arguments, or threats preceded the use of the firearm. Additionally, investigators have not publicly stated whether the shooting occurred inside a specific room of the residence or whether movement throughout the home occurred prior to the gunshot. These unanswered details remain central to understanding the full context of the incident. After deputies secured the scene, emergency medical personnel transported DeQuarius Green to a nearby hospital. The method of transport, whether by ambulance or air evacuation, was not specified in public reports. Upon arrival, he was admitted for emergency treatment due to the severity of his injury. Green remained hospitalized for several days following the shooting. During this period, medical teams worked to stabilize his condition. While specific medical procedures have not been disclosed, authorities confirmed that his condition remained serious throughout his hospitalization. There were no public updates indicating significant improvement. Hospital staff did not release statements beyond confirming that Green was receiving ongoing care. Family or legal representatives did not provide medical updates through public channels. On December 27, 2025, several days after the shooting, DeQuarius Green was pronounced dead at the hospital. His death was attributed directly to complications resulting from the gunshot wound during the domestic incident. The official cause of death was listed as injuries related to the gunshot wound. The manner of death classification, such as homicide or justifiable homicide, was not clearly defined in publicly available records at the time of reporting. No autopsy findings or coroner's report details were released to the public. It remains unclear whether additional contributing factors were identified during the post-mortem examination. From the outset, investigators categorized the incident as domestic-related. Law enforcement confirmed that a woman was involved in the incident but did not publicly release her name. She was present at the scene and cooperated with deputies. No immediate arrest was made on the day of the shooting or in the days following Green's death. Authorities stated that the investigation was ongoing and that all available evidence would be reviewed before any charging decisions were made. Deputies conducted interviews, collected physical evidence from the residents, and submitted the firearm for examination. Statements were reportedly gathered from individuals present, though the content of those statements has not been made public. Investigators indicated that self-defense was a factor being evaluated in the case. Under Alabama law, the use of deadly force may be justified if a person reasonably believes it is necessary to prevent imminent death, serious physical injury, or certain violent crimes. The domestic nature of the incident required investigators to assess whether the individual who fired the weapon believed they were in immediate danger. This evaluation included examining physical evidence, witness statements, and the history between the individuals involved. Green's prior domestic violence allegations were part of the broader context considered by investigators. Although those previous cases had been dismissed, they were relevant in assessing whether there was a documented pattern of conflict that could inform claims of self-defense. Law enforcement did not confirm whether the shooting was preliminarily ruled justified. No immediate arrest was made on the day of the shooting or in the days following Green's death. Authorities stated that the investigation was ongoing and that all available evidence would be reviewed before any charging decisions were made. Deputies conducted interviews, collected physical evidence from the residents, and submitted the firearm for examination. Statements were reportedly gathered from individuals present, though the content of those statements has not been made public. Investigators indicated that self-defense was a factor being evaluated in the case. Under Alabama law, the use of deadly force may be justified if a person reasonably believes it is necessary to prevent imminent death, serious physical injury, or certain violent crimes. The domestic nature of the incident required investigators to assess whether the individual who fired the weapon believed they were in immediate danger. This evaluation included examining physical evidence, witness statements, and the history between the individuals involved. Green's prior domestic violence allegations were part of the broader context considered by investigators. Although those previous cases had been dismissed, they were relevant in assessing whether there was a documented pattern of conflict that could inform claims of self-defense. Law enforcement did not confirm whether the shooting was preliminarily ruled justified, only that self-defense was under review. As of the latest available information, no criminal charges had been announced in connection with the shooting or Green's death. The absence of charges suggested that prosecutors were either awaiting additional findings or reviewing whether the evidence supported criminal prosecution. The district attorney's office held the authority to determine whether the case would be presented to a grand jury. No confirmation was provided regarding whether a grand jury review had occurred or was scheduled. Officials did not clarify whether the investigation was formally closed or remained open pending further review. The lack of public updates left the final legal resolution of the case undetermined. The death of DeQuarius Green prompted immediate reactions from religious institutions, local residents, and the wider public. These responses varied in tone and focus, reflecting the complexity of the case and the conflicting information available at the time. While some reactions emphasized Green's role as a pastor and community leader, others centered on unresolved domestic violence concerns and the absence of criminal charges following a fatal shooting. Elba Zion Missionary Baptist Church released official statements acknowledging the death of DeQuarius Green and confirming his role as their pastor. The statements focused on his service to the church, his leadership within the congregation, and his work in ministry. The church did not reference the legal history connected to Green or the circumstances surrounding the shooting in detail. Instead, the messaging centered on continuity, faith, and remembrance. Church leadership described Green as a committed pastor who served the congregation during his tenure. Public communications avoided mention of the domestic nature of the incident, the ongoing investigation, or the unresolved questions surrounding the shooting. This approach aligned with common institutional practices following the death of a religious leader, particularly when legal matters remained open or unclear. Following the announcement of Green's death, memorial services and prayer vigils were organized. These gatherings were held both at church facilities and in community spaces. Attendees included congregation members, fellow pastors, and residents from surrounding areas. The memorials focused on Green's ministry, sermons, and community involvement. Speakers referenced his role within the church rather than the events leading to his death. The vigils did not address the legal investigation or the domestic violence allegations that had previously been filed against him. These events served as institutional acknowledgments of his position and status rather than forums for discussion about accountability or domestic violence prevention. Throughout official church communications and memorial events, emphasis remained on Green's identity as a pastor. This framing shaped how many community members initially understood the case. The focus on his religious role contributed to a narrative that prioritized professional legacy over personal conduct. This emphasis also influenced public discourse, particularly among individuals whose primary exposure to the case came through church-related messaging. By highlighting Green's pastoral duties without addressing legal concerns, the church's response played a role in shaping early public perception. Public reaction to the case was divided. Some community members expressed concern over the loss of a religious leader and focused on the impact on the church and Green's family. Others raised questions about the domestic violence allegations that preceded the shooting and the circumstances under which the fatal injury occurred. Local residents discussed the case in informal settings, online platforms, and community forums. Opinions varied based on individuals' familiarity with Green, awareness of his legal history, and perspectives on domestic violence cases. The lack of detailed information released by law enforcement contributed to uncertainty and speculation. As more information about Green's prior domestic violence charges became publicly known, discussions expanded beyond the immediate incident. Community conversations began to address how domestic violence cases are handled within the legal system and why multiple charges can be dismissed without resolution. Some discussions focused on the difficulty victims face when pursuing charges, particularly in cases involving individuals with social standing or institutional support. Others questioned whether earlier intervention could have altered the outcome. These conversations did not produce consensus. Instead, they highlighted long-standing tensions between public accountability, legal standards, and community loyalty. Online discussions further amplified divisions. Debates emerged regarding whether the shooting constituted self-defense and how Green's prior allegations should factor into public judgment. Some participants argued that dismissed charges should not influence perceptions of the incident. Others emphasized patterns in domestic violence cases where charges are dropped due to pressure, fear, or resources. The absence of an arrest or formal charges intensified these debates. Without a definitive legal conclusion, online narratives diverged, often reflecting broader societal views on domestic violence, self-defense laws, and gender dynamics. Domestic violence cases frequently involve barriers that prevent victims from pursuing legal action. These barriers include fear of retaliation, financial dependence, social pressure, and concerns about credibility. In cases involving community leaders, these challenges can be amplified. Victims may face isolation or disbelief, particularly when the accused holds a respected position. Reporting abuse can lead to social consequences that discourage continued cooperation with law enforcement. A recurring feature in domestic violence cases is dismissal when victims decline to testify. This pattern was present in Green's legal history. While dismissals are legally valid outcomes, they do not necessarily indicate the absence of harm.
The reliance on victim testimony places significant burden on individuals already navigating complex personal and safety concerns. When testimony is withdrawn, cases often end without formal findings, leaving underlying issues unresolved. Several risk factors commonly associated with domestic violence escalation were present, including repeated allegations, prior court involvement, and ongoing personal disputes. These factors are recognized indicators in domestic violence research and are often used to assess potential future harm. The presence of these factors does not determine outcomes, but it highlights the importance of early intervention and consistent legal follow-through. Religious leaders often occupy positions of authority and trust. This status can create power imbalances in personal relationships and complicate accountability when allegations arise. Congregants may hesitate to question leadership, and victims may fear disbelief. These dynamics can discourage reporting and contribute to institutional silence. Church communities frequently prioritize unity and reputation. This can result in limited internal scrutiny when leaders face allegations. Concerns about public image may outweigh efforts to address misconduct transparently. In this case, no public evidence suggests that the church conducted internal reviews related to Green's legal history. When alleged abusers hold leadership roles, victims may experience additional barriers to seeking help. These include fear of social exclusion, loss of support networks, and institutional resistance. The case underscores the need for clear accountability mechanisms within faith-based organizations, particularly when allegations involve violence. Despite public acknowledgement that D'Aquarius Green died as a result of a gunshot wound sustained during a domestic incident, several critical questions remain unresolved. These unanswered elements form the core of why the case continues to attract attention and scrutiny. The most central question is who fired the weapon and under what exact circumstances. Law enforcement confirmed that a firearm was discharged inside a residence during a domestic dispute, resulting in Green's critical injury. However, investigators did not publicly identify the individual who fired the shot. Reports indicate that a woman was present at the scene and was believed to be directly involved in the incident, but no official statement clarified whether she admitted to firing the weapon, whether the firearm discharged during a struggle, or whether other individuals were present. The absence of a clear, public sequence of events has left the precise circumstances of the shooting undefined. Closely connected is the question of why no criminal charges were filed despite a fatal outcome. In most homicide cases, the death of an individual triggers either an arrest or a formal explanation outlining why charges are not being pursued. In this case, law enforcement did not announce an arrest, nor did prosecutors publicly state that the shooting was ruled legally justified. This silence suggests that investigators may have determined the shooting fell under self-defense or justifiable use of force, but no official ruling was released to confirm this. Without a formal explanation, the decision not to charge anyone remains open to interpretation. Another unresolved issue involves potential witnesses who have not spoken publicly. Domestic incidents often occur in private settings, but they are not always unwitnessed. It remains unclear whether other adults, children, or nearby residents were present at the time of the shooting. If witnesses existed, their statements have not been released. It is also unknown whether any witnesses declined to cooperate or whether their testimony played a role in the investigative outcome. The lack of publicly acknowledged witness accounts limits outside understanding of how investigators evaluated the incident. The case also raises questions about whether prior legal dismissals contributed to the escalation that ended in death. Before the shooting, D'Aquarius Green had faced multiple domestic violence allegations. These cases were dismissed after alleged victims declined to testify, a common occurrence in domestic violence prosecutions. While dismissed cases do not constitute proof of guilt, patterns of repeated allegations can indicate ongoing conflict. Whether these prior legal outcomes influenced the dynamics inside the residence on the night of the shooting is unknown.
What is clear is that no long-term legal restrictions or court-ordered interventions were in place at the time of the incident. Finally, there is uncertainty regarding the official status of the investigation. Law enforcement did not clearly state whether the case was closed following Green's death or whether it remained under review. In cases involving claims of self-defense, it is not uncommon for files to remain technically open until prosecutors formally decline charges. Without a public closing statement, it remains unclear whether additional evidence could alter the case's legal standing in the future. The confirmed facts of the case are limited but consistent. Dequarius Green, a 31-year-old pastor, was shot inside a residence in Level Plains, Alabama during a domestic incident in December 2025. He was transported to a hospital in critical condition and died several days later from complications related to the gunshot wound. Law enforcement classified the event as domestic-related and confirmed that no immediate arrests were made. No criminal charges were publicly filed in connection with his death. Beyond these facts, much of the case remains unresolved. Investigators did not publicly identify the shooter, did not release a detailed reconstruction of the events, and did not issue a formal legal justification explaining the absence of charges. The role of prior domestic violence allegations, though documented in court records, was not publicly addressed in investigative conclusions. The lack of transparency has left critical aspects of the case unanswered. The impact of the case extends beyond legal questions. For Green's family, his death represents the sudden loss of a father and relative under circumstances that were never fully explained. For the church he led, the case created a complex legacy, blending public mourning with unanswered concerns about private conduct. For the broader community, the incident reinforced ongoing discussions about domestic violence, accountability, and how the justice system handles cases where victims and alleged aggressors are closely connected. This case illustrates how domestic violence incidents can result in fatal outcomes without clear legal resolution. Dismissed charges, private settings, reluctant witnesses, and self-defense considerations can combine to limit accountability or clarity, even when a life is lost. The death of Dequarius Green stands as an example of how legal closure does not always equate to public understanding, and how unanswered questions can persist long after an investigation concludes. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.